En dan kan je dus, als je scherm wil dat doen,
Ja, dat is nogmaals.
nou, is gewoon teken hier. Dan kan je gewoon naar de PowerPoint. Dus, als je
Niet
dat
nog een
hebt
keer op Send Live drukken.
jawel. Zeg maar wat andere mensen.
Ja, we hebben
Het is alleen voor de mensen.
we hebben ook al.
Is dat, hey, is zit er even een vraagje in?
Ja, 15 seconden. Ja, dat is wel, en je kan een beetje testen. Hè? Van, jij kijkt niet naar het luisteren.
Ja. En hij heeft echt een.
Hi, yes. But for those of you in the group, you could go to menti.com. And we'll figure it out.
Dat is met die mensen. Ja, dankjewel.
Oké, ja, geen probleem.
Waarom zo langzaam zijn?
The first points are appearing.
Oh,
Yes, Grace. Almost. Still the soil mission supports. Bye. for everyone that just joined us in the room. We're going to be asking a bunch of questions through Mentimeter. So if you could already log in, and we have a little practice question for you, just to see if it's all working and to get an idea of how diverse our group is today. And also for the people watching us at home, I hope you can all hear us and can all see us. If you could please join the Mentimeter by using the code you see on the top of the slide, then we can get started in a couple of minutes. Hopefully, once the room fills up a bit more. We won't start before all the seats are taken. Yeah. Can you all hear me also well in the room? Okay, perfect. Right. Yeah. Yeah. All right. We're going to get started. So once again, for those who haven't connected yet, please remember to connect to the Menti. And we see quite a bit of participants from the Netherlands, as was expected a bit, as we're in Utrecht right now. But we also have a bit of a more diverse group, Spain, United Kingdom. But today, we're going to be talking to you about a project working on supporting a soil deal for Europe, which Annette Sneegans talked to us about this morning. And before starting, I would like to give her the floor to briefly introduce a bit the Soil Mission Support, which is the project that we will be talking to you in a few moments. And you, of course, you were here all this morning, but Annette Sneegans is DG Agriculture and Rural Development.
So hello again. I think you saw me all this morning. At least I recognize your faces. So I will not go again. I just presented the mission. Now, how this relates, the Soil Deal Mission and the project, SMS. Yeah, SMS, Soil Mission Support. I will just say a couple of words. So SMS is a still Horizon 2020 project. You know, we have these framework programs, Horizon 2020, was the previous one to Horizon Europe. And at that time, when the topic was published in 2018, I think 2018, we still did not have a mission. We knew we would be applying for a mission, would be developing one, and we were hopeful that from a number of ideas for missions, we would get selected and eventually start, so last year. So the call was a bit anticipating. What if we have a mission all of a sudden starting in 2021? What kind of preparation would we need? What kind of resources would it be good to have from the very beginning of the mission? And this is why we published the topic. It was a very generic one. I think you did a great job in sort of thinking, what can we provide to a mission that doesn't exist, but we know it's in the area of soil health? And that kind of thinking led you to looking at a number of issues such as the research gaps that we have for soil, research gaps, research needs. What is the kind of roadmaps of thinking we need to look into to getting towards certain objectives? Again, at the time, we did not have the mission objectives, so SMS aligned more to SDGs. And I think this was quite a challenge to look in the course of the project how you can combine your structure of SDGs to the mission structure of specific objectives. But it's something that I think you did quite well. And then the other issue was, how can we start preparing communities to align and organize and be ready for some activities in other mission? So this was for me one of the most important things in the call. Now, as the mission was approved and SMS was already in motion, we knew that we would have as a big emphasis the living labs. So SMS also looked into that. This was an additional task into mapping what does exist already, what kind of experiences do exist that either could qualify as living labs or at least are a good basis for the various stakeholders to develop the living labs. And so this is for us a deliverable that is really interesting, and we're looking forward to see how that can be used as a resource. Now, today, sure how you will run this. It's kind of a brainstorming workshop on how to further develop your various deliverables. And I don't know if you will have a report or some conclusions, but in any case, it will be very interesting for us, of course, also as we further develop our lines of research. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annette, for the great introduction. And now, starting then this session, my name is Laura Nogues, and I'm here today with my two colleagues, Jas Brils and Linda Maring, all from Deltares, but we're here today representing the Soil Mission Support. So my first slides, I'm going to go briefly through them because, of course, Annette already mentioned this morning, but very briefly, soil health has a huge, vital role in sustainable development and achieving the SDGs. So these top 6 ones you see on the slides, they're directly impacted by healthy soils or influenced by healthy soils. It can be by developing healthy soils. And the 4 underneath there are indirectly impacted, but are still very closely linked to healthy soils. And with healthy soils, you also have a huge amount of ecosystem services. So it's important to reach this healthy soil point. And of course, a soil deal for Europe was launched, which is one of the 5 missions from the Horizon Europe RNI framework. And the goal is then to achieve this healthy soils in all soil functions, and explicitly to develop or find 100 living labs and lighthouses to lead the transition towards healthy soils by 2030. And also, as already mentioned this morning, of course, there are 8 objectives that need to be reached to have these healthy soils, and this is across all land sectors, so urban, industry, forestry, nature, and agriculture. Some land sectors have a little more knowledge available or more practices already implemented, but it's important to make sure that by 2030, we have a huge knowledge basin across all land sectors and involving all different actors. And then we come in the Soil Mission Support Project. So the SMS, in short, aims to improve the coordination of RNI on soil and land management by focusing on 3 of the building blocks that were mentioned this morning. So building the capacities and the knowledge base for soil stewardships. What we do with that is really focus on research and innovation gaps in soil and land management. So we map current RNI knowledge, so the stocks that we have. We analyzed different needs that different stakeholders have from each of their perspectives. Then we identified the gaps that need to be filled to achieve the mission's goal. The second building block that the SMS focuses on is the living labs and lighthouses. We identify which ones there are now, which characteristics they have, where they are, we map them, and we try to see which criteria are important in making these living labs and lighthouses successful. And then the last building block that we work on is the 4th one, so the actor engagement. And here have co-creation activities covering all relevant actors, sectors, and policy fields. We have an actor engagement guide, this is all part of the final deliverables. And then the point which is overlapping two different building blocks is our development of an R&I roadmap and different platforms to co-design. We co-designed a platform, active platform, where all this information will be on, that everyone can go and find the gaps, the engagement guides, the living labs and lighthouses, and so forth. So this is our soil mission sports project. We're almost done now. The project finishes in October, so we have a couple more months now to finalize all these deliverables. And that's what we would like to talk to you about today. So each of the different building blocks has its own brainstorm session today. First one about living labs and lighthouses will be led by Linda. And here we're going to talk about other things, business models and successful business models. Then Jos will take over and take you through actor engagement and soil literacy. And our final building block, upper block, all about maybe a bit shorter, will be again hosted by Linda. Gaps for management. At the end, we have insights from final work that has to be deliverables, and we'll be doing that with active mentoring sessions phone. So hopefully you all manage. I can also soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. This microphone makes a bit of a noise, but we need it. We need it because of the live stream, because we have a few people also online. And people online, we cannot read your questions, as I saw. But you are invited to also discuss with us through the Mentimeter later on. The next slide, I'm going to tell you something about living labs and lighthouses. My name is Linda. Okay, I have to carry this thing and then hopefully it works. Yeah. Yeah, but I cannot open the clip. I do not have trousers on where I can hang this on. So it's a little bit complicated, but we will manage together. I was working mainly in the project on living labs and lighthouses. And as you can see in this picture here, we made a map of living labs and lighthouses. The mission board already made a fantastic list of over 200 different living labs, or actually most of them were lighthouses later on, as we saw, because they were single sites, for example. And we built it upon that and added a lot of examples as well. Also adding extra examples of urban living labs. Industrials were very hard to find, or not to find actually. Forestry, nature, so we also focused on that quite a bit. And you can see this website, soilmissionsupport.eu. And here you can find all our deliverables and also the map. It's now a bit under construction, but later on you can take a look. It's not very complicated, soilmissionsupport.eu, the same name as the project has. And the living labs, we start with it because this major aim for this implementation plan to get to 100 living labs, and that's quite a lot when you consider that each living lab consists of 5 to 10 or 20 sites. So it is a huge operation going on, and very exciting one, I think. This is a lot of text. I'm not going to read it, but these are the longer definitions, what a living lab and a lighthouse is according to the implementation plan. And Annette already explained this morning, but the most important thing to realize is that a living lab consists of multiple sites. So, for example, for farms, you can show on an ecosystem scale what is happening and what is changing. For industrial sites, for example, we discussed quite a lot with the Nicole network on industrial land. There it works a little bit different potentially. You could work on a shared problem, for example. And a nice example here is the emerging contaminants issue that every industrial site in Europe has to deal with, or almost every one of them. So you could also think about linking to the objective of contaminated soils and see if you can find better methods to work on this PFAS problematics, for example. But this is really work in progress. And the lighthouses can be one site, and they can emerge from the living lab. So as you can see in the figure, one of the sites in a living lab can be a lighthouse as well. And there it shows an exemplary demonstration of solutions, for example. So you can also show people, showcase what is happening there, and also try to use these lighthouses to upscale your solutions. As I said, at the moment in the list of living labs that we have, most of them can actually be considered lighthouses because they show, for example, a management technique that is very successful, or they can show specific innovations, or they have been developed there. So it is a little bit difficult yet, but there's a lot of potential in what is already happening, but it is still a little bit hard to frame them all into living labs as being defined by the Soil Mission implementation plan. And here you can see some statistics. It's from the Living Lab and Lighthouse list of September 2021. We have now quite some more of them. And what you can see here, we did not reframe the living labs to lighthouses yet, so it looks like we had a lot of living labs. But what is more interesting is that you have a lot of entries on agricultural land and much less on forest systems and urban land. And industrial land, as I said before, is completely missing. Welcome. And what you also can see is that we have some European countries that have a lot of entries here. And it's not because they have more living labs and lighthouses. It's because of the mission board members, for example, who put a lot of entries here. And also later on, when we start to add entries, for me, it was much more easy to find Dutch entries than, for example, entries from Slovenia. There are no Slovenian partners in our consortium. So this is also for the follow-up projects a challenge to really look what's going on, and also to find these niche areas or areas from countries that are a little bit less represented in European projects. And this list will be soon completely on the website that I showed, soilmissionsupport.eu. I make a lot of today. Sorry about the noise again. This was also already shown a bit by Laura before, but there are different phases, and Annette already told us this morning that the next call, the first wave of living labs, will be asked for next year. So yeah, it means a lot of work to try to get people and sites working together in these quite large living lab projects. But I think there is really a lot of interest for it. At least, as I mentioned, the Nicole network on industrial land is really looking forward to do something here. Municipalities are also looking forward to do something with urban soils. And of course, in the agricultural world, this is also a great opportunity to build upon, for example, existing sites that are doing experimenting. So I think we can look forward to next year what comes in here. Really have to click the button. So, of course.
You say that within the next call, you say, okay, 5 living labs should be collaborating together. And being on the same topic. So they should be working on the same topic. Instance. So could you think of having a living lab, for instance, in an urban area, close to an industrial area, but on the other side also to an agriculture area? So there you have 5 different living labs dealing with different clusters, but collaborating on the regional development, like for instance these 3 zones for returned area. Or should these living labs be all dealing on agricultural land, for instance, and a specific topic?
So it's, do you hear me? It's difficult to be very prescriptive because, well, by nature, living labs should be bottom up. So it's a generic guidance. So first, have in mind that why do we ask for a project 4 to 5 living labs? It's simply, first of all, there's a minimum in a European project to have at least 3 partners from member states. So by definition, you have only 3 different countries, 3 different living labs. For associated countries, Norway, Switzerland, Israel, Turkey, so this couple of. And we want to go beyond. So 3 is like the bare minimum. 4 to 5 or like just to start with. Now, there should be, of course, a connecting thread because it wouldn't make sense. Why should a living lab in Spain agriculture? Farmers, why should they bother to collaborate with an industrial area lab in the Netherlands? This makes sense, right? So there should be connection that adds value to this. And of course, if you deal with almonds in Spain and wheat in the Netherlands, grapes in Germany, it's not the same, but there could be what could be there? Of organic matter, or reducing, or if you look at landscape level, how do you do water management? So there needs some connection. It doesn't need to be exactly the same because things are very. Oh yeah, your idea is goodness. We want to look at urban areas, how industry and the surrounding. And this you do across, in this you do across Europe. There it makes sense to have similar.
Thank you. And I also think for farmland, it might be different than for industrial land, because if you look at industrial sites, they're normally not in the vicinity of each other. So what you could do when it starts zooming again, what you could do is also to look at similar problems at different sites, even in different countries, forming one living lab. So this is something I think to elaborate further on, because for urban and industrial land, it can work a little bit different. And we also found a lot of living labs from GPI Urban Europe, and they have, for example, they work on biodiversity in urban areas or greening, vertical greens in urban lands for different purposes. But there I think you can also have a cross-border living lab. But this is my opinion. I would really like to invite you to get your ideas, what you see as promising living labs. And it can be a topic, or it can be a problem, a shared problem, or a shared ambition. Climate change adaptation and mitigation, I think it comes from Peter. Am I right or not? No? It's from you. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, okay. If you look at, of course, the goals from Europe, in my opinion, there are three main drivers: climate change, biodiversity crisis, and circularity. And anyway, in every living lab, you should make visible what measures you take and what kind of effect they have on those three issues, in my opinion. So yeah, these are the three main crises. So yeah, the living labs should focus on them. Yeah. Yeah.
So you were saying you're looking at major challenges, but please try and address. So we have these 8 specific others through the. So I think the framing should allow to in soil literacy. So also that you can use a way to guide what doesn't need to be exactly. Can it contribute? Areas. You have to speak louder. That's important. Sing it, you can hear. But you see, circular. It was quite basically. By itself. Together with Barbara.
It's sorry for the online people, but this microphone makes such noise. We will try again, but it makes a lot of noise here. So if it really doesn't work, we will cut you off again. I'm sorry about that, but we will give it a try again. So the second point was about the business models for living labs, and we gave some examples. Another example of how to sustain a living lab, it can be by education. We have some examples where applied universities use living labs. At least in the Netherlands, we found some, and also in Finland, where education is the main topic, and also is taking care of the sustainability of a living lab. By getting budgets from both the applied university, but also national governments to keep talent in the region. And this can also be a business model. Innovation, developing innovations, for example, in pharma practices can be a business model. And we were really interested in if you can give us also some examples for revenues for living labs, how to be sure that it can last longer than a project time frame. And, a lot about no sound. Membership fees. Yeah, we also found a membership fee. I'm not sure who said that, but yeah, we also found examples of that as well. So this can be a great way, but you must be sure that people get something back from that as well. So it can be education or knowledge. So this can work very well. Oh, and about the comments about euros, it's not always about money. It can be very different revenues. So it can be also the knowledge or the educational objective. So it's not always about making money. It can be also societal benefits. De groene circle, kaas en bodemdaling. I think we already have that in the list as well. Yeah. Yeah, preferably when you design a living lab, you also look at these markets. So you have to design a living lab, taking also care about the long-term viability of this living lab. So you need to connect, if you can, to markets as well. But there is no prescribed recipe for setting up a living lab, I think. It depends on the land use, it depends on the problem or the ambition or the objective of the living labs. And if you go through the living lab literature, you have quite some examples, but there's not so much about business models yet. That is an interesting one. If you look at objective 8, that's about the soil footprint or the footprint on soils. And that should be actually, in my opinion, about markets. That's quite a hard one. But if you do things in a different, for example, the food industry, if you do not change consumption, if you do not change import-export issues or subsidies, then it will be very hard to not have a footprint outside Europe on soils. And same for materials, for example, like sand and gravel and wood for energy production. So there is a lot about trade that is steering the way that how we do things. But this is a very complicated discussion, and we are still thinking about how could we also make a living lab about this footprint on soils topic, because there it is very much touched. Yeah, and this is also part of the design, because we have no examples yet of these living labs, or we did not find them.
I would say don't put too much restrictions on living labs, because what we want to achieve, in my opinion, that is creating awareness and that we have to change something, transformations. And we often don't know exactly the way how to come there. That's a process. And because if you're talking about the market, I would say banks should be involved. And they are probably more important than we put them in the living lab. So yeah, I would say don't fix it too much.
Final remark, because we also have to go to the next topic. Saskia.
And I'm going to profit from the opportunity to say some words about the Green Circle cheese and submission. Really slow. The problem that they had, it's a cheese factory in the Alblasserdse Waard, so on peatlands, and the problem that they deal with declining soils, a lot of mitigation from because of the peatlands. And what they set up is a collaboration between the province, the cheese factory, which is an exporting cheese factory, the water board, the banks, and the cooperatives for the milking farms, and thinking about okay, we want to continue to make cheese, but maybe different cheese, and we want to avoid the issue of continuously upscaling, tackle the mitigation problem, and make sure that we do this in a biodiverse environment. And together they set up a vision for this area. So they have like 200 farmers still being a farmer, but farming in a total drastically different manner with high water tables and low mitigation problems. And I think this is an excellent example of a living lab where all people work towards the same goal with a broad range of different stakeholders.
But no, it's important because you all may be thinking about in practical terms to prepare a proposal to submit. I was giving the example of this. Also think about this value chain. Could be states, local farming, the local market. Yeah, that could be one. Living lab. It can be 10 actors. So have that in mind. Didn't give any. So in the other thing, you will still, and this is will have to found same criteria as any other. Excellent. So the important thing find very and then on the otherwise you
A lot of discussion needs to be, and people really want to talk about living labs. So I think it would be great if there will be some discussion sessions later on about living labs, also under the umbrella project, perhaps. Yeah, the engagement sessions. I want to give the floor to Jos, who will talk about actors.
Thank you. I just put it down. I'm not going to hassle around because I think it's really annoying. My name is Jos Brils, introduced already. I work also for Deltares. I'm not a soil guy. My love is into sediments. I have been involved in setting up the European Sediment Network. So we are lobbying like you do for soil, but we do it for sediments. And we do that already for more than 20 years now. And we are getting more and more successful. Not yet as successful as soil, but we have now, it's upcoming, it's nearly there, a guidance document on sediment management in relation to the Water Framework Directive. But getting back to soil, we in sediment say, if you want to manage your natural system, you have to take the soil sediment water perspective. So you have to do that in a systemic way. So really making the connection between soil, water, and sediments. But that's not what I should talk about now. I should talk about soil literacy. And honestly, for me, literacy, what does it mean? I had to look it up in the dictionary. And I learned that it's competence and knowledge in a specified area. I thought, okay, that's too generic. So I dived into the Soil Deal for Europe, and then you find this. This is all about popular awareness about the importance of soil. I talked about sediments, you talk about soil, but I think we should talk about ecosystems. And specialized and practice-oriented knowledge related to achieving soil health. And that's really important. What does SMS do? Well, we contribute in many ways to soil literacy. Today I will talk a little bit about ontology and I will talk about active engagement. But we're also developing policy briefs and all kinds of other things that really fit nicely in soil literacy. Ontology. For whom of you is this familiar? Who have ever heard about ontology. See only, okay, about 30%. Well, ontology, this is a definition. It's a specification of a representational vocabulary for a shared domain of discourse. Why would you have to need that? Well, in my opinion, and I think achieving soil health is really about working together to make a next step there. So if you have to work together with actors, you need really to have a common language. Because if you don't have a common language, you don't know how to work with each other. And in the end, it's also there to enable learning together, to manage together. How do you develop an ontology? First of all, of course, you start to define the shared domain of discourse. And that's an easy one. I will come back to that later. Then, for that domain of discourse, you select objects which are relevant to that domain of discourse. You conceptualize how these objects interrelate, and then for each object, you define that object in a common vocabulary. And of course, we started, and I will show you later on, from what we could already find in science, but in the end, this needs to be tested and co-developed with the stakeholders together to come to a meaningful language. So, for SMS or soil or achieving soil health, we said our domain of discourse is soil and land management aimed to achieve the 8 soil mission objectives. That was an easy one. And then we had to think about what kind of hierarchy levels do we have, because you have different levels of hierarchy, and in each level you develop a conceptual model and you define the objects. The first one, of course, you have to define what do we mean with soil, land use, etc., land use types. That's the highest level. A level deeper, after something is said, well, that should deal with soil management. And even a level deeper than that, that should really connect to achieving of the soil mission objectives. We have done the first 2 levels. I will share them with you already. And we are still developing the 3rd level, but I will maybe tell a little bit more about that later. So this is the first level. We thought we were looking in literature, online, for nice conceptual pictures where you could in one picture show land, soil, land use, land cover, all these types. We could not really find it. So we asked an artist for the main land use types in Europe to develop this picture, which you can use, and it will be made publicly available, which you can use to show, okay, where are we talking about? What is soil? What is land use? What is land cover? So that's the conceptual model. You have the objects, and then for each object, you look for a common language. And we used agro vocabulary, but also other sources. So we made a proposal for the definition of these objects. Whether this will sustain in practice in the living nets and the lighthouses, that must have to be seen. But at least it helped us in the SMS project already. Where are we talking? What are we talking about? Because if you talk about soil, do you talk about the same thing if I talk about soil? What do we mean by that? So that's the first level. That was quite easy. Then this one took some time because, so soil management, what's the conceptual model behind soil management? And after some thinking, I said, okay, it might be very interesting to connect this way of thinking also to the way of thinking, how we think in the Water Framework Directive. Whom of you is familiar with Water Framework Directive? Also 30%. The key thing in the Water Framework Directive is also has this systemic oriented approach, but it has this 6-year cycle. So every 6 years, you observe, you monitor, and then you improve your system, your management approach. So that was the core. And of course, the core is starting to the left with soil ecosystems. So we have on one hand, we have the soil ecosystem. And on the right side, you have the people who make use of that system. You can call them stakeholders. And that use is what we call making use of soil ecosystem services to the benefit of users. But on top, you see a look back, and that has been discussed this morning by many. that use will exert a certain pressure on the system. That can be overuse, that can be exceeding the boundaries, that can be contamination, that can be trade-offs among user services. So that's the core, soil ecosystem and users. Then of course, the thing is, if you want to get that balance right between precious services, etc., you need to manage these systems. And then on the left, you see, basically for management, you need to get information. And in my perspective, there are two ways of how you can collate information, and they are fundamentally different. On the low end side, I on the purpose use the word observe. And observe is different than what we heard this morning, monitor. Observe for me relates really to science, better understanding of ecosystems, etc., etc. While monitor relates to policy goals. So you set standards, or like in the Water Framework Directive, you have environmental quality standards. I don't know if they will be developed for soil, but there will be maybe some guidance values, etc. So that's monitor. You monitor whether or not you exceed these standards. That kind of information, in the ideal world, you pass to the users, and that can be, in our perspective, that should be a combination of all the people, so policymakers, farmers, etc. And these users digest information and in the end use that information to develop a soil management strategy or soil management plan, or whatever you want to call it. And in that strategy, you include a program of measures. And then these measures implemented will hopefully lead to an improvement of the system. But because we are working in such complex systems, you have to do this by a learning by doing approach. So it should be cyclic. I don't know, every 5, maybe every 6 years, you need to improve your plan by learning by doing. And this is also, I think, something that could be really tested in living labs and lighthouses, this approach. Going into the second part, actor engagement. As I explained in the previous picture, in the ideal world, you do this together with all the people, well, to whom this concerns. We also made definitions here. So we define stakeholders as anyone who is affected in their interest or concern by changes in land and soil management. That's a stakeholder. An actor is a little bit more active. So that's a stakeholder who also engages in land and soil management. So who really acts. So who really engage in the living labs and lighthouses. Sustainable and healthy, these terms we took from the soil deal. Sustainable actually really means management that enables soil health, and healthy soils are just soils that have the enduring capacity to deliver ecosystem services. Right. We developed also an actor engagement guide. It's public. If you go to the SMS website, it's there. It gives you tips and tricks. It tells about practical experiences, how it should be done. A lot of the things that have been mentioned this morning, you will find back also in this actor engagement guide. Because for me, it always boils down to really apply common sense. But the key thing we put forward in this actor engagement guide, you always have to think about what's in for him or her. Because that's probably the only thing that make him or her work to get interested in what you have to offer. And for that, we use this very simple model. It's from the Canvas business model, and it's about developing a value proposition. So we as scientists, I think most of us are scientists in the room, we are really more on the blue side. So we have a package, and we want to offer something to the right side, so the policymakers, to the farmers, to the industry. And to make that connect, I think we have to start to think from the right to the left, and not from the left. It's not about sending information, but it's really about, like what Mr. Verwerda explained this morning, really listen talking, understanding, and then in a way translate that into, okay, now I understand what your job is, but I also understand where you can increase your gain, your benefits, but also I see where you face pains, like laws that you have to meet or investments you have to make. That kind of thinking we applied in this document already on these actor groups. So for all of these actor groups, we applied this thinking, but we as scientists applied it. So we try to put ourselves in the position of a policymaker. Of course, researchers were a little bit easier, and then came up with this first draft on these value propositions. And we also wrote down in the guidance document, this should now be taken forward and really get into engagement with all these actor groups and test that proposition and improve it. Because the better that proposition will be, the more successful probably it will be to engage with actors. So, and that brings me to the Mentimeter question. So please see to which actor group you belong. Keep the number in mind, because you have to use that number. And of course, you can be in 2 or maybe even 3 actor groups, but please take your preferred actor group, and then we go to the question. So what would you gain? So what is your gain, or how would you benefit when soil health is achieved and maintained? So type your actor number, and that can be many things. Sorry. So number 1, policymaker or government. Number 2, researcher. 3, funder. 4, land user, manager. 5, private sector or industry. 6, service provider. 7, an NGO. And 8, citizen. Linda, I propose not to discuss now because we have time pressure. Go to the next slide, next question, and then you take over. Okay, also having a look at the time, I want to go to the next question, and that's the opposite. So what kind of pains, or what would give you a headache from your perspective as actor? What do you fear when soil health is achieved and will be maintained? Might be a difficult one, but please try to think about, okay, if we have that and it will be sustained, but would it hurt me? out of work. Still see some of you typing. So 1 more minute and we will move to the as a scientist, personally, I would never be afraid that we would run out of business because I'm trained as a biologist, and the first thing I learned is that ecosystems are not even complex, but even more complex than we can think of. So even if we put in all the knowledge, probably we will have to continue working and studying, improving. And I don't want to be a pessimist, but if you really have followed what's happened with the Water Framework Directive, we are now in the 4th generation of river basin management plans. Made huge investments over the last 15, 20 years, and we hardly see any improvement in ecology and the water quality. So how will this be for soil? So Annette is not here anymore, but how realistic are the targets that have been set in the soil mission? Do you expect that we will ever reach soil health? Last remark for Co, and then we go to the next. Here also maybe that we are focusing too much on the planet side and not enough on people. Right. Right. Okay, maybe for discussion during the lunch, I think we have to move now because otherwise you will face problems with other issues. Whom of you is taking over now? Linda again. Thank you for the input. By the way, we will collate all the materials and we can make it available for anyone. So.
So the last part is about the R&I gaps, and we kept it until the final bit because we already assumed that we have a little bit less time for this topic. But it's also the most familiar part of most of the attendees, we thought. R&I gaps and that were defined by different actors. So Laura already showed you this, what we did in our project. It's quite boring story, but I'll go through it quite quickly. We looked at existing literature with the tool, looking at what topics are covered in the last few years that have a link with the soil mission, and we saw a lot of information was there. So this is what we call the stock taking of knowledge, and we also looked at existing Horizon projects on soil. What were they actually about? And we realized that this is only a part of what has been done. Also, the national amount of projects will be huge compared to only European and English language reported projects. So there is much more than we have gathered here. We also looked at R&I needs. So we set out a survey to actors in Europe, and we also had afterwards some validation workshop with actors, one about the agricultural land and natural and forestry, and the other one about industrial and urban land. And we invited actors to discuss these R&I gaps and add to that. And we had a separate one about this soil footprint objectives, because that is quite new and a little bit less defined than the other objectives. And these were very nice workshops with a lot of attention and a lot of nice outcomes. They're also, I hope the results can also be found on the website. They should be, but you can take a look there as well. What we are doing, so here you see a little bit the result of what we did. You see at the left side different knowledge domains, such as awareness, education, science-based policy support, the specific regions. They will come back in a question later if we have time, and living labs, etc. And on the upper side, you see the different mission objectives. And here you see where we have most information. So the red blocks are where we got the most information. So it can be there a lot of attention, but also a lot of gaps. And the green ones are where we have least information. So it does not mean that there are no gaps, but we haven't had so many information about that. For example, what I mentioned before, these specific regions, we looked at Europe, but we did not look specifically to alpine regions or to peat meadows in Europe. So here some effort needs to be done to find out what are the specific questions there, because in the mission it's also about the slogan of the Green Deal, nobody should be left behind. So we should take attention to all these regions and specific areas that have problems with soil health. And what we do now, this is very small, and this is for a reason, because I don't want to go into this, but what we use, same as in the mission implementation plan, is impact pathway graphics. So we look at what is the long-term impact that we want to make, and what do you need to know to find this out. And this is actually where we are working at currently. For each of the objectives, we are looking at what R&I is needed, what do we need to do, and if we can also, who should take action. And this will end up in the final roadmap. There will be also a follow-up, a full project on roadmaps that will start end of this year, we think. And people in the SMS project are also in this project, so we can transfer our information to the follow-up project, where they can go a bit more in depth than this exercise. But here already we see a lot of fields that need attention for the next years, and that might also be suitable topics for living labs. And we also found, of course, and this is just part of it, but we found a lot of gaps that were mentioned that actually apply all of the objectives, such as more policy or better aligned policies, for example, or missing policy, the awareness issue, how to get people so far that they do things differently to change the system. Maps, indicators, and all these are being developed within the different building blocks of the mission. But these are very important to realize. Also data, for example, you always see that coming back in surveys. So this one I want to skip because it will take a lot of time and we have around 8 minutes and I'm quite hungry and I assume you as well. But we wanted to discuss here, next to living labs and next to just normal R&I projects within Horizon Europe, are there other opportunities to close these gaps? But we skip this now. But we want, I would like you to think a little bit about this specific topic. And how can we also reach these specific areas in this niche research gaps? And you do not need to put it in the Menti now, but I think this is very important for the follow-up projects as well, because you have the risk that you put a lot of effort in a niche problem that only 2 countries within Europe have, but at the same time, they are real problems. So we deal with them if you also want to reach everybody. This is a very important one, follow-up projects and researchers to try to find solutions for this specific part. And nice, that's I think that is from Saskia. The AGP, you have a poster, so we can discuss later on under your poster about this topic as well. Jos. Yeah. The methods, yeah. And same also for countries that cooperate a little bit less now in Horizon Europe. I think it's very important to also try to involve them as well. No, we have 5 minutes in the session. So, but I think it's good to talk during the poster session about this later on. Yeah, this R&I topic, sorry that we cannot go too far into it further, but also here we will have some information later on our website. It's soilmissionsupport.eu. And there I also hope that you can, sorry to already mention it, but that you can be present at our final conference where we have a little bit more time to discuss these issues. Is in September 27 in Brussels, and you can register by the website. So Laura.
Yeah, so to close off today's session, I want to thank you all for your input. And for us, we've already mentioned the SMS project is coming to an end. So we have a couple more months and then it's finished. So what are the next steps? Well, there are follow-up projects coming up. Prep Soil is starting in a week. And that's with we will be working on this one from Deltares, but a lot of other SMS partners will also be joining to pass on the knowledge that we've just gained these past years. A second project will also be starting up soon with other SMS partners. And I believe, Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, the name is Solos for this one. So that's already some concrete steps in how we can pass on all this knowledge we've collected. And then there are also other granted and upcoming calls that we're just going to actively follow and reply to. And yeah, so I want to thank you all again for participating. And remind you, Annette also said similar words this morning. Be engaged, join these kind of sessions. The symposium Linda mentioned on the 27th of September, the SMS conference. Be engaged in discussions, explore yourself circular bio-based societies to see what we can do within, to which contributions we can implement within planetary boundaries. And this sounds like a very big goal, but you can also try to implement this on a smaller day-to-day scale. And then we hope you enjoyed the session, and maybe some last words from you to us, and a one-word short evaluation of what you found in this session. Yeah, of course, love to hear your feedback, and hopefully it's all positive. But if it's not, that's okay. It's all anonymous. You can also share that, of course. And you can also choose other people's answers if you've already found something you agree with. Yeah. And also in the lunch break, Jos, Linda, and me will still be around for if you still have questions or want to discuss specific things we talked about today. Please don't hesitate to find us. We'd love to engage and talk to you all. Yeah.
I think it's best. But it's good to mention it perhaps in the tender text, also for. But but it's maybe good to mention it as well, because otherwise I know that we have been blocked in. How they have been. So yeah. Maybe not developing new out industrial brownfield. Get some. They were not part of the earlier FP7 brownfield, but they really need knowledge and station. So cycle different in different parts of Europe. Nations parts of developing new. This is something that
bottleneck.
Final words, and then we stop.
Perfect. Thank you all for your inputs. And have a nice lunch break.